So today the title of our presentation is The Phoenix, Hopewell, Virginia, the city that refuses to quit. And if you've been around a while, you know that that's very true. Jeanie Langford is our speaker today, and she's our opener and our closer every year. Just FYI, she will do the same next year, and the first Lunch and Learn will be on Wednesday, May 19th, 2027. She's already committed, so you can count on Jeanie to be here. Now, Jeanie gives me, I get the same resume from her every year, and we've all heard it, so I'm going to highlight a couple of things. Jeanie was born in Narrows, Virginia. She's lived in Hopewell since she was 3. She graduated from Hopewell High, attended the College of William and Mary, and focused her studies on history. But we all know how special Jeanie is and how smart Jeanie is and all the wonderful things she does for our city. And my brother-in-law, George, my husband's eldest brother, coined it perfectly at an event in the library. Jeanie Langford is the queen. So welcome, queen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is a pretty special program, and I'm excited to do it for y'all. It is entitled The Phoenix, and if you'll notice, I made the Phoenix blue and gold, because what are we? Blue and gold. The city that refuses to quit. The phoenix bird has been important in many different cultures. It is a symbol of rebirth, of learning from your mistakes and second chances, not just for corporations, but for a community identity. Believe it or not, this area has been occupied by humans for at least 18,000 years. It has been fought over for at least that long. The very earliest people that came were here during the end of the Ice Age, and they hunted mastodons. Recently, a mastodon tooth was unearthed in Yorktown. As the climate changed and it warmed, the mastodons died off, partially from hunting, but also because the things that they ate, spruce and pine, were cold weather things. So the oak trees and different other trees came along, so they had nothing to eat. As time progressed, the native people here acquired different technologies and reinvented themselves once again. Corn came up through Mexico. Pottery came through Mexico. They developed long trade routes. So they learned how to carve out bowls from the Western tribes from stone so they could boil water and cook differently. They traded for stones to make their spear points. They traded seashells for corn seeds and also for copper that came all the way from the Great Lakes. So we have been kind of global for many thousands of years. When the first colonists arrived, the native people, the Powhatans, were already pretty organized. They had a small form of maybe a democratic government with Powhatan as the president and all the other chiefs as the cabinet are representing different states. They also were very good to women, and they had female chiefs. The natives helped the colonists a great deal. However, the colonists took advantage of them. So we're going through another reinvention phase. City Point was actually founded in 1613 as Charles City Point. That makes Charles City Point, and this area one of the longest occupied places in what is now the United States, because Jamestown was abandoned, Williamsburg was abandoned, various other places, but someone was always here for over 400 years. Oops, let me back up. This is the mural that's in the post office. It is highly romanticized because Captain Francis Epps was not exactly on the best of terms with the Powhatans. He got his land through 30 years of fighting with the Native Americans and for being such a good Indian spy. When he came here with his land grant in 1635, he named a portion of his farmland Hopewell Farms. So the name Hopewell has actually been around for almost 4 centuries, before we became a city. This area has always reinvented itself, and it, toward the end of the Revolution, became a prime target. So Benedict Arnold sailed up the river to take Richmond. On his way, he burned many of the estates. He stole tobacco. He stole corn. He stole livestock and horses. General Cornwallis was also here. And you've all heard the tale of Sally's Ride. But he did not burn a lot because he thought that all these people here were loyalists. In the meantime, Lafayette was cleverly getting great intelligence and was able, with the help, to cause the defeat of Cornwallis, which won the Revolution. After the Revolution, City Point recreated itself again. It became a very busy port, not just for tobacco, but for all types of goods. And it was the beginning of, I guess, what you'd call cottage industry. Blacksmiths, making gunpowder, because we weren't on the best terms with the British anymore, so we couldn't get all these imports. So we were making it ourselves. City Point continued to prosper throughout the following years, but there would come a time when it was time to change again. And that was the Civil War, or as some of us fondly call it, the War of Northern Aggression. So City Point sent many soldiers to the Confederacy, and they fought for their land. But General Ulysses S. Grant, in a stroke of genius, realized that City Point was the key. He brought almost his entire Union Army here and set up what would become the busiest port in Dixie. Ships came, they unloaded, and basically this allowed the Union Army and the Union to starve the Confederacy into surrender. Abraham Lincoln spent the last 3 weeks, pretty much of his life, in City Point, thinking about the terms of surrender and how the South would be treated. After the surrender, once again, the area would have to recreate itself and rise up from the ashes. Tobacco was no longer as important. So new crops had to come. New ways of doing things had to come. Basically, the land had been marched over, shelled, exploded, so it was in pretty bad shape. But the people here wanted to continue, and they recreated themselves once again. From a very strange source. When the Czechoslovakians and the Armenians and the Bohemians first began to migrate to this country, the government said, "We have a wonderful place for y'all. We have land that you can get cheap, and it'll remind you of your home in the Alps. This land is in North and South Dakota." Well, they went, and it wasn't exactly the best farming land, and burr, it was cold. So after the war, when the South is trying to rebuild and this area is trying to rebuild, land became very cheap. And so the enterprising Czechoslovakians said, "This looks like a much better place." So 700 families of Czechs, Armenians, Bohemians moved into Prince George County. Well, they bought large chunk of land, they participated in the community, and they brought new crops that would money makers, peanuts and grapes. So they helped give new life back to this area. Well, that went on, but this area was in for a surprise. In 1912, DuPont, the powder company, decided, you know, this would be an excellent place to build a small dynamite plant. So they came here. They bought 800 acres of the Epps land, which the Eppses were probably happy to sell because, like so many of the other old families, they were land poor. You can have all the land, but if you have nobody to work it, what good is it? So DuPont came here in 1912 and built the small dynamite plant. Well, somehow I think they may have known, but in 1914, World War I begins. Well, most of Europe had not been prepared. They had really no gunpowder, no gun cotton. They needed it. So DuPont built the world's largest gun cotton factory right back there. Immediately, the population of this area, some of the accounts vary, may have swelled to 30 to 50,000 people. That's how many people that plant was employing. They came from everywhere. So another influx of new blood from Greece, from Poland, from France, and from all across, pretty much east of the Mississippi, people came to work at this plant. The town sprang up out of a cornfield overnight. There were merchants, there were stores. Housing was built for the workers. But on December the 12th, 1915, December the 9th, disaster struck. There are different accounts of why it happened, but the entire city caught on fire and burned to the ground. Of course, the whole city then was only Hopewell Street, Appomattox Street, what's now Main Street, and over to the railroad tracks, but it was all gone. Fortunately, it did not get to the plant, because if it had just one or two sparks, and we might still be picking up the pieces. But incredibly, it did not quit. Within a matter of 4 weeks, almost everything had been rebuilt. Hopewell decided they wanted to be a city of the first class. So they went to the General Assembly. The governor fought it wholeheartedly. No, this is the worst place. Everybody carries guns. There's no law. This can't be a city. But finally, the General Assembly agreed, and Hopewell became a city of the first class. It was the only place in Virginia he became a city, and had never been a town, never been anything. It got the name Hopewell because the Epps family requested that that be the name for the city. As you can see, it was huge. There are different estimates, but somewhere between 30 and 40 smokestacks. They were making 1.5 million pounds of gun cotton a day. Without it, Europe could have looked very different because they had very few supplies to fight with. These are some pictures from the fire and the ruins and the devastation of the fire. We quickly rebuilt. And you can see the old Chesterfield Hotel and some of the other stores. But this time we rebuilt with brick, so we weren't quite as fire prone. The war ended in November of 1918. DuPont left. That also meant that Camp Lee closed. So what had been the third biggest population center in Virginia dropped from 40 or 50,000 people down to 2,000 people. And everybody in the state thought for sure we were dead and we weren't coming back. However, some people stayed and they fought. And we actually got the right to elect our own officials, because when Hopewell was first formed, hardly nobody that was here was registered to vote. They were either foreigners are people who hadn't lived here long enough to be able to vote. So not till 1920 could we actually elect our own officials. Uh-oh. Whoops, back up. Why are we having trouble? Okay, let me go back. Darn. So this is the cover off of one of the two DuPont splinters. And what I love about this one is this is from 1917. There's Uncle Sam, but it says, Hopewell, it's up to you. And that's kind of the attitude that we have always taken. This is an image of troops during World War I marching down Brickety Hill to load onto ships to go overseas. And yes, they were right. We were not going to stay dead. When DuPont left, they left numerous large buildings. And at first it was small industries, like the China plant and Sam Scott luggage and other different small things that occupied these buildings. But that was going to change, and we were going to recreate ourselves once again. So, a Belgian company named 2B's that had suffered greatly during the war decided that this would be a grand place to put a rayon plant. The people here had already worked with chemicals, and the process was almost identical. So 2B's came here and began construction of their plant. When the plant was completed, 2B's was employing almost 2,500 people. Put people back to work. They also employed a large number of women because the knitting and dyeing process, women were much better at that because they had a finer eye for detail. As you can see, more construction of the 2B's plant, and the Queen Lady at 2B's, Miss Mary Morris. This is a colorized image of the completion of the plant. And y'all, some of you may remember what the area looked like. So that encouraged other industries. National Co., which made lots of things, including ammonia and artificial nitrogen that could go into fertilizers and later would be needed in weaponry. This is an image of nitrogen division and the trains and the work. And this little engine right over here, Nitrogen Division 1, was just recently retired after almost 100 years and is now in the Train Museum at Crewe. The paper mill comes, originally called Hummel Ross. Then it would become just Hummel. And I have spoken about the Hummels before and their contributions to the city. So once again, even more employment and looking at things differently. The city begins to have more new businesses in the 20s. And during the 20s, late 20s, even during the Depression, construction goes on. The old high school, the bridge across the river, the municipal building, a state-of-the-art fire department, the airport, and Hopewell, Virginia, Virginia's inland port, Virginia's fastest growing city. So these industries are here, and they are producing all kinds of chemicals. And they would be needed even more, because once again, we would pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off after the TV's plant closed. And what we made here would become crucial beginning in 1941, because we entered World War II. Camp Lee reopened, increasing the population drastically once again. These are some old images of Camp Lee during the war years. Hercules is still producing. These plants are producing things that go into military supply. Tubies had left their knitting and dyeing operation here. Rayon, parachutes. You couldn't necessarily make parachutes out of expensive silk. So what were they made of? Rayon. And when they're knitting and dyeing, camouflage, black, different colors to help protect the troops. After the war, the soldiers, a lot of our soldiers come home. Some did not. But they come home and they have some benefits. The GI Bill. Many of our community leaders and young people took advantage of that GI Bill and recreated themselves into attorneys, running businesses that made the community stronger. Baseball, Hercules and the other plants sponsored baseball teams. And this one I truly have always enjoyed, because this is the African American baseball team from Hercules. It features many of the names and people we know, like the Wheelers and the Powells and Buster Jameson, and the Reverend Curtis Harris was the catcher. They were people from all over came to watch them play, and they were considered to be one of the finest baseball teams around. Well, the area that had been 2Bs, they left, but something new came, and once again we recreate. And this time we're making a new product. Firestone comes, and we're making nylon. Nylon goes in clothing. Nylon goes in carpet. Nylon goes in seat belts. Nylon was everywhere. And we were making that right here, and that brought numerous jobs to make up for the closing of another plant. The 1960s, we recreated ourselves once again in many ways. It was the civil rights movement, and we changed our old ways and our old feelings over the course of time in the 60s. And here, the Reverend Curtis Harris was a true leader. He traveled with Dr. Martin Luther King. He marched in Selma and Montgomery, and he spoke up for people's rights here and followed Dr. King's teachings of change with peace. And we did change, because I grew up during segregation. And we did. We went to school with each other and we learned from each other. And he was instrumental in helping us make that change once again from old to new. Cavalier Square. Yes, that was another Phoenix. Well, we all thought that was the greatest thing that ever happened. Most of us had never even seen a shopping center. I was in like the 8th grade when it opened, and it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen. Well, what we didn't know or didn't believe was, at the time, we were shooting ourselves in the foot, because the great parking and the wonder of it all helped kill our downtown. Many of the businesses closed. Some of them moved to Cavalier Square. So that hurt downtown Hopewell greatly. We just didn't know what we were doing. But then we got hurt again because something better came along, known as the mall, which means you didn't have to be outside to shop at all. We thought that was wonderful. So once again, we were hurting our own selves without knowing it. The dreaded 6-letter word, K-E-P-O-N-E. It might even be worse than some other curse words we might know. That was a terrible disaster. If it had not been for a keen-eyed person who worked for the city, it possibly could have been much worse. It was being pumped directly into the creek and then into the river, because Allied had sold the process to the individuals that were running Life Science Project. And they did not have, they were running it from an old service station. They really didn't have all the things to be as careful as they needed to be. It did make some people who worked in the plant very sick. It closed the river for like 13 years. We went from being the chemical capital of the world to the chemical capital of the South to the keepone capital of the world. It took great effort to remove the keepone and to bury the keepone. But incredibly, we did manage to hold our heads up and come back from it. What happened was, because of this disaster, industries became more environmentally conscious. We became, as residents, more environmentally conscious. So we're recreating our thought pattern once again, and incredibly, the keepone burial site just outside the plant, over the course of time, has become almost like a miniature wildlife refuge. The deer love to graze there. The other wildlife enjoys it. So in a way, disposing of it has had some benefits. And it also brought us into a new way of thought and our industry into a new way of thinking. So once again, the Phoenix touched us. The Phoenix is on its way back. The Downtown Partnership is working very hard to help bring downtown back. The Beacon renovation, the Farmers Market, and Donnie Barber's, I believe it's third Thursdays, are very popular. The marina is being revitalized, and we believe in ourselves. And the gentleman, Mr. Bosch, has done an amazing job with the buildings across from the car shed. They are absolutely beautiful, and he is working on some other projects here in town. And the Riverwalk. That's another part of the Phoenix and the way to come back. It's quite lovely, and there are plans to extend it even further, which means you could almost walk, the way I understand it, from the marina up at Cameron's Landing all the way down. And wouldn't that be lovely? So we are recreating ourselves once again. I don't know how many more times the Phoenix can come back, but we make every effort to be that Phoenix. And you have to believe that we can do it again, because we are a strong community and we have overcome so much, and we can do it again. And I hope y'all have enjoyed, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you all so much. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.